lips and black bra. In the projects, rich is whipping that black hard. Rhymes insane. My skills is whipping that crack hard. Look at LeBron James. The black guard, got big lips and black bra. As soon as I leave Earth, it's back to the stars. Right to job lives with jewelers and girls. Just ask nods if I rule the world. Yo, my mental vision, setting up intuition. And you really don't have nothing if you intuition. I work with light just to give birth to life. I was born in all forms in the perfect night. The black god, got big lips and black bras. As soon as I leave Earth, it's back to the stars. I am the ruler, just like the Lion of Judah. My third eye was built like an iron computer. That's dark matter and deep thought making your heart shatter. I sleepwalk, talking with smart chatter. So I don't need you to ride or die with me. I got ancestors that vibe from the other side with me. And they beam up life after death. We got noses on our eyes cause the light's a breath. My priceless flesh, the final copy. Look like Anunnaki. Black God, got big lips and black bra. In the projects, rich is whipping that black hard. Rhymes insane. My skills is whipping that crack hard. Look at LeBron James. The black guard, got big lips and black bra. As soon as I leave Earth, it's back to the stars. Right to job lives with jewelers and girls. Just ask nods if I rule the world. Yo, the black guard, got big lips and black bras. In the projects, rich is whipping that black hard. My rhymes the same, my skills is whipping that crack hard. Look at LeBron James, that nigga's a black heart. And you wonder why we spit lead. Just the old raps, niggas got big heads like old Max. Way that I'm writing is more than vague. This is the age of enlightenment. We the Moors in Spain. Now that your honor, I pray to a black vagina. Even the Pope prayed to the black Madonna. In the sun, I shine as bright as I be. I'm the greatest of all time, like Muhammad Ali. And when I die, baptized in the fire. Only fly at night, black skies are higher. Prior to Jah, my lives with jewelers and girls. Just ask nods if I rule the world, rubies and pearls. The black guard, got big lips and black bra. In the projects, rich is whipping that black hard. Rhymes insane. My skills is whipping that crack hard. Look at LeBron James. The black guard, got big lips and black bra. As soon as I leave Earth, it's back to the stars. Right to job lives with jewelers and girls. Just ask nods if I rule the world. Yo, the black guard, from infinite to infinite stars, it's infinite light. My life's got an infinite charge. The instruments I implement to give strength to your heart. The temple within, the imprint, mimic the art. Into the dark, the dragon spark the fathom from a higher consciousness. I talk with atoms, I live in the land, and I live in the stars, original man. I am the image of God, call me Tut Ankh-Amen. I cut diamonds, so as long as I live, nothing can stop shining. You gon' need to be in the bins to drive me crazy. Live on CNN, hearing cries from Haiti. You know the people down there trying to hide them babies. The black guards, surrounded in light, attract stars. Black guards, surrounded in light, attract stars. The black guards, surrounded in light, attract stars.
I told you, all of my critics, I told you all that I was the greatest of all time. All of you, I know you got it. I know you got it, but the man didn't come. I'm going to show you how great I am. I told you, I'm the real champion. I told you, I'm the champion of all. All of you know. All of my critics know. All of you know.
Peace. Hold up, I don't know if I'm being heard or not. Let me see. Mic check. All right, hold up, let me see something. All right, there you go. My bad, fellas. Ladies and gentlemen, you're now rocking with the best. You're now under the sounds of your brother Hanu Kiel, a.k.a. A1, a.k.a. Conscious One. I got my brother Amani Bay, and we just waiting for Peter Moon to come through. But before he come through, Amani Bay wanted to drop some knowledge on some current events. So I'm going to mute my mic and let him go in.
Greetings there, family. Great to be with you again, and today is going to be an awesome presentation and discussion with the Honorable Peter Moon there. But before that, I wanted to kind of go over a brief current topic It's a tragedy that occurred about a week and a half ago. Um, and I wanted to kind of share. Some of you may have heard of it, but there was a tragic murder in Barranquilla, Colombia. A brother from Atlanta, Timothy Timothy Rebel Reed. He's 54 years old, young brother there, and he had moved to Colombia in last December and was killed, at the end of April. And it's tragic. Um, and he basically we can learn from this type of event. He basically wanted to start a restaurant and become a landlord. So he had purchased a building, and so with units, and inside that building was also a restaurant, and he was going to bring over his delicious southern Atlanta, Georgian type food and introduce it to that particular culture there. But unfortunately, he had a lot of finances, and so he basically invested the equivalent of about 250,000 U.S. dollars. And he had met a Colombian female online, and then he moved there, and he got his visa. And so they went to meet with at that time, the owner of the building. He struck the deal. Now he couldn't speak Spanish, could not understand a word they were saying. So he wrote a check, gave the check to the guy there, and then a few days later, he's outside, broad daylight, shot twice in the head, execution style. Now the newspapers, local newspapers, titled "American Gringo Killed for Gold Chain," which was not the truth. So basically, it was a setup. So I guess and for I'm still doing a lot of research on it, but I think that it was with the female he met online, the building, the guy he passed the money to, and some other individuals as well. It was a unified um, mission from on their side to murder this brother here. And once she got in and got access to his other bank accounts, I mean, my God, you know, they can live like for the rest of their lives by just basically stealing his stuff. So, but the lesson learned is that now with the global condition that we're under now, um, is not the time to invest in restaurant businesses. It's the last thing you should be thinking of. I wish I could have advised him, and never enter into any business deals with other foreigners. You cannot speak their language. You don't know the nuances of the culture. Um, I mean that was just a bad recipe from the beginning, right? So, but through tragic events, we can learn a lot. Now is the time to tighten up. Basically, you want to go into your bunker. It's not about just loosey goosey spending out hundreds of thousands of dollars during this time. Um, so yeah, you can, anyone's interested in that story, it's Timothy Rebel Reed, um, and yeah, he was killed in Barranquilla, Colombia. So just wanted to kind of another thing, yeah, Colombia, right? I mean, it's one of the highest murder rates in the world. It's basically a lawless place, in my opinion. And whoever murdered him will never be caught. There will never be justice, right? So we have to be careful the places we travel to, um, and if you choose to settle and leave America to live somewhere else, in my opinion, you want to make sure that nation has high civilization of law and justice. That's key. So I mean, you don't want to be a wildebeest going on to entering into a land of lions and hyenas. You will get mauled, right? So I just wanted to share that with the family there. There's a lot of tragedy there, and so his family back in Georgia, of course, kind of happy. I kind of knew him through another friend of mine, actually. So that's why it kind of hit home for me um, there. And we're the same age as well. Um, but he was happy after making that purchase, and he thought that there would be those people were like him, honorable and looking to. He had no idea that he was food, right? So, but just wanted to share that, and we can switch from that gloom and come back into the sunshine, and get ready for Mr. Peter Moon to grace us with his experience, and he will share a lot of his experience that I think will be educational for all of us. Um, and yeah, he did really incredible things. And so I will introduce him and then ask him about some of the experiences that I want to know more about, and then have him expand on that and the catalyst behind him getting involved in those projects. And that's how we're going to structure that. And then um, A1 will also ask him questions about other works. And I don't know if the family's familiar with Mr. Peter Moon's work, but he's a prolific writer, um, done many interesting projects and works, and that a lot of it's connected to, indigenous American culture, right? Ancient Tamarian or Egyptian culture. So um, it's going to be exciting there and interesting, very very educational there. Hopefully, so let me contact him to make sure he knows how to connect to the link here. So I'll mute myself and be right back.
All right, y'all. I'm back. Just before the brother Peter Moon come on, I just like to say, everybody be respectful to the brother, whether you agree or disagree. This is not going to be for everyone, but for those that will enjoy it, just definitely just take notes on what the brother's saying. I actually first seen a good interview with him back in, I think, around like 2009 on KTL, No Ledge Radio. And he actually just did another video on Moors in America. One of the brothers actually came on the platform, and I was building with him on that about it. But definitely gonna be an interesting build. So like I said, it's not for everybody. It's not the regular Native American conversation for those who come to the channel for that. But for the most part, it's about just knowledge and it's about just enlightenment. Um, and I just urge that a lot of people in this community, start looking for other avenues of research pertaining to Americas and pertaining to us, and stop just relying upon, um, just the conventional conversations that we have out here. Like, most of you guys know, as I always say it, you know what I'm saying? I went through a lot of different, not just schools of thought, but just dealing with knowledge or knowledge based information. And I think it come full circle at the end of the day. I got some good bills coming up I'm not gonna put them out there because it seems like a lot of people, they come up with stuff and then they always claiming that they the first ones to do something. It's not even about being the first to do anything. It's about enlightening the people. Um, Never charge for information. Just if you like to donate, always donate. If you can, if you can't, just take the information and just pass it on to to your peers, to your family, just to people through walks of life. For the most part, um, you know, and it's not even about no egos. It's not about who's the best scholar. It's just pretty much about just about sharing the information and just being enlightened, and just definitely teaching the youth as well, like I said, your family, your children, and people through walks of life. So with no further ado, I think we got the gentleman Peter Moon on.
I would like to introduce him first.
Go
That's
ahead.
fine.
All right, you got it.
Yes, thanks, man, for tuning in here. Again, we are all honored to have Mr. Peter Moon, and I'd like to introduce him. Basically, as I said before, a prolific writer with stellar work here, and he's also worked with other writers um, on their projects. But just to name a few of the works by him. We have the great work Synchronicity and the Seventh Seal, of course, the Montauk Book of the Dead, the Montauk Book of the Living, the Spandau Mystery. And then he worked with and great Radu Cinemar with the work Transylvanian Sunrise and Transylvanian Moonrise, A Secret Initiation in the Mysteries Land of the Gods, Mysterious Land of the Gods. So, without further ado, I will pray he can unmute himself and we can get started. Welcome there.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, perfect, perfect. Welcome, Mr. Peter Moon, and thanks for taking time out. We all appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. It's very nice to be with you.
Wonderful. I'd like to start off. I was really interested in the backdrop of your introduction and experience with working with Radu Cinemar. And I know that Dr. Anderson had invited you to Romania. So could you kind of explain the beginning, embryonic stage in this great work in your
Certainly.
experience in traveling there?
It's an interesting story and how it intertwines, and it didn't necessarily intertwine the way I thought it did in the beginning. What happened is, well, it's actually, I'll backdrop it a little bit more. I'll go back to 1989. This is 3 years prior to the Montauk project being published, and about a little over a year before I met Preston Nichols. I had a dream of being in Dracula's fortress or castle. It's really not a castle, it's a fortress. And the dream I had actually looks like it's Polinari Fortress in the Carpathians, where people would cross to get into Transylvania. And it was where Vlad Tepes had a fortress to repel any people coming in, particularly the Turks. Now, I didn't know there was such a fortress, but I dreamt that I was there. And in dreaming of it, I was into his castle, into his fortress, and I saw his brides. They were etheric forms. They were, I guess you would say, etheric, but they were also naked. They were sexually attractive. And I was like penetrating this inner chamber of his, and they were beginning to swirl in such a way that I would later only realize when I actually wrote the dream into a story and I published a book called The White Bat. but it was actually realized that they were simulating what was the motion of a time reactor. That Dr. David Anderson, who would bring me to Romania, would actually invent. So anyway, my dream was sort of a presage of the future that I was getting through the dream state. Now, when I saw these naked, etheric female forms, I was then entered the chamber, whatever it was. It looked like a big room. The vampire Dracula came, much like you would expect from the movie, and I had violated his territory, and boy was he angry that I had gotten into his chamber. And he then began to pursue me, and I ran out of the castle, and I ran and I ran and I ran until finally it became sunrise. And I said, at sunrise, he loses his power. So I turned around and began to chase him. And as I chased him and began to catch up with him, he turned into a wolf. I grabbed for his heels, and when I grabbed his hoofs, he turned into a bat. And then I was in the patio, the courtyard of the fortress, and it was, mostly ruined in ruins. And the bat became white. The bat became white, and then he turned into the opposite of a dark vampire. He was wearing white, and he explained to me that he was the antithesis. Instead of the yang, he was the yin, or instead of the yin, he was the yang. And this is an important point because there's always an antidote. There's always a black and the white, a white and the black. So this was a very inspiring dream I had in 1989. And this is a precursor to everything that happened with me. I was picking up on some essence of Romania, and the dream of the women was mimicking the time reactor. And as I speak to you, this is the first time I've ever mentally associated the time reactor with sexuality. I've never even thought about it. Of course, the Montauk project and all of that work is very much associated with sexuality, but not so much, not the work of Dr. David Anderson or the device he has created. That's something I'm going to have to muse on when I go to sleep tonight. But that was a precursor. Now, a few years later, I would meet Preston Nichols a year later and eventually work on the book for the next year and publish the book in 1992, which is now we're at the 29th anniversary of the Montauk project being released. So to fast forward to 1999, August 11th, on the day of a major grand cross in the skies. It was an eclipse and a grand cross. David Anderson walked into my life. Dr. David Anderson, he had just returned from Romania. He had just gotten back from Romania. And one of the first things on his list was to seek me out. And he attended our monthly meeting that we used to have on Long Island, a Montauk night. And at that time, it was in Belmore, Long Island, at my friend Laurie Saluzzi's house. And David walked in. He introduced himself as a physicist. He asked questions. Preston was doing all the talking, as was typical. And after the meeting, David Anderson came up to me and he said, I would like to work with you. My name's David Anderson. I'm a doctor. I've got a time travel research center. I said, oh, I know who you are. Because he had subscribed to my newsletter. The Time Travel Research Center was where his stationery said, but I thought that the stationery was just some kid who was calling himself a Time Travel Research Center. I thought it was sophomoric. But when I met him and he talked, I said, this character knows what the hell he's talking about. He's very advanced. And he said at that point he had a time reactor that was about the size of a soccer ball that could slow down and speed up time. It was funded, his company, which was called the Time Travel Research Center, was funded by interest in the medical field, who would want to slow down time so they could preserve organs for transplant. A lot of big money in that. So anyway, he wanted to meet with me. He explained more about the technology to me. And he said that he had just returned from Romania. In fact, he took me out to lunch at a place called On the Border, Mexican restaurant. He insisted on paying for everything. And then when we got back, we sat in front of my house for, God, at least a half an hour, maybe more, talking about tax strategies. And because he had just started a foundation called the World Genesis Foundation. And this was to help fund, it was a charity for Romanian artists, writers, and scientists, and to encourage them. Now, his inspiration from that, the World Genesis Foundation, was he'd just gotten back from Romania, and where he had been a speaker at a camp called Atlanticron, which has met on an island, we now call it Atlanticron Island, near Capidava, Romania, on the Danube in southeastern Romania, probably a 45-minute drive to the Black Sea. So anyway, he was there to speak to artists, writers, and scientists because he was in Germany at the time, and the German speaker that was supposed to go there had to cancel, so David was a substitute. He went to Romania, and it completely changed his life because he was greeted by these people, and they warmly welcomed him. It had traditionally been a science fiction camp that was started by a man named Sorin Rapanovich and his friends, because he used to camp out there and fish as a young man, because he lived in the nearby bigger town of Cernavodă. And as he became more influential in the government, eventually becoming the head of nuclear security in Romania, he could muster government resources, which included houseboats that were Russian-made during communist times, which could be used as a place where they had generators and whatnot. There was an electrical hookup from across the river. Cables were put under the water. So you have an island, and it's somewhat sophisticated, but it's also rustic. So David wanted me to go to that camp. He says, you should come to that camp. It's really great. You'd fit in there. There's this one woman I want you to meet. And she's like he described her as a very astute person when it came to metaphysics. So anyway, he wanted me to come to Romania. Now, around the same time, well, this was 1999. And then David would then befriend me. He put up my first website. He would come over to my house to do that. He was a friend, but he was also very mysterious. He would go out of touch for periods of time, and then he'd come back in touch, and so on and so forth. Without going into the long story of him and my interrelationships with him, he, in about 2003 or 2002, I received an inquiry from a man in Romania whose name was Sorin, also had the first name Sorin Hormuz, who wanted to publish the Montauk project in Romanian. Now, Sorin Hormuz was an editor working for a publication house, and the owner said, I want you to read this book, The Montauk Project, and tell me whether I should translate it as a publisher in Romanian. So Sorin read the book and says, yes, you should translate it. You should publish it. The publisher decided not to, so Sorin went out on his own. He opened up his own publication company and starting with the Montauk Project. And he did very well. He attracted other authors, but one of the first authors he attracted who had read the Montauk Project was a man who identified himself as Radu Sinemar, who has, I've read this book you've published. I have manuscript I'd like you to see if you'd like to publish it. So he did publish it. And this is the book that is now in English called Transylvania Sunrise. In Romanian, the title was originally called The Enemy Within. I didn't like that title because number one is The Enemy Within. It's about an enemy in Romania, not here. When the book was eventually published, the title was not called The Enemy Within. It translates awkwardly into English, and Romanians will tell you it's also awkward in Romanian. It's called Death's Head Future. Death's Head Future. Now, of course, this book is about a chamber beneath the Romanian Sphinx, that a chamber that is ancient, estimated to be 50,000 years old, and has technology which we would identify as modern or futuristic, but it's actually ancient. It has holographic technology. It's bioresonant. It includes a projection hall where you can see the history of the world, but it's the history of the world as you would see it, not necessarily as someone else would see it. It's bioresonant with your intuition, your DNA, and what you might be interested in. This projection hall included 3 tunnels, all going into the inner earth, one going into the inner earth per se, one going to Egypt with a similar chamber beneath the Giza Plateau, one going to Tibet via Baghdad with an offshoot to Mongolia with similar installations. So that is where Radu Cinemar comes into the fold of, and I am sent this book in 2000. This chamber was discovered in August of 2003, coincident with the biorhythms of the 20-year biorhythms of the Philadelphia experiment in the Montauk project. It went 43, 63, 83, 2003. 63 was a project at ITT Brentwood on Long Island, which was the forerunner of the HARP project. 2003, we waited with a lot of anticipation. What was going to happen in August of 2023? Well, what happened was a major blackout in New York that extended from Preston's new home, was the epicenter in Cairo, New York, extending all the way out to Montauk, into Ohio, into Canada. The biggest blackout the nation has ever had. But at the same time that was occurring, within a span of days, I don't know exactly what day they broached the chamber, but they were able to access this chamber in Romania with the help of American atomic laser technology. So this book was sent to me in 2004 or thereabouts. It was immediately translated into English, and they sent it to me. It took me 4 years to get around to reading the book. And when I read it, I began negotiations, which took a while. As soon as I completed the negotiations, I was contacted by Dr. David Anderson, and he says, how would you like to go to Romania? This is something he'd wanted for a long time, but he also said he wouldn't be in touch with me for 4 years or 5 years. 5 years, he said. It was 5 years to the week he said that. He says, I'll pay for you to go to Romania, all expenses. You can take a friend if you want, which I did. And I went to Romania in 2007. To give you the backstory, David had called me and was setting up the logistics of the trip. And he said, as part of this World Genesis Foundation, which is sponsoring your trip to Romania, we offer you a 3-day cultural tour to get some idea of the country. What would you like to do? Where would you like to go? I said, well, I don't know, but I want to see this Hall of Records is what I called it, the projection hall. He says, oh, I know what you're talking about. So what can you tell me about it? He says, well, I'm more comfortable talking to you about that in Romania, not here. I don't, people listen to me. I'm more comfortable. We can sit back and have a glass of wine on the Danube and talk about it. Well, we really don't get a chance to talk. I said, oh, that's great. In the meantime, I was contacted by Radu Cinemar, and I had a running correspondence with him for quite a while. Infrequent correspondence, but nevertheless, it's voluminous, was voluminous then compared to today, where it's very sparse nowadays. Once in a while I hear from him. But he said, I want to send you a CD with some information. And I said, don't send it to me. Wait till I get to Romania and give it to me there. Is it possible I can meet with you when I'm in Romania? He says, no, I'd rather meet with you in America. And he did want to meet with me in America, eventually telling me, I came very close to your house, but I decided not to, because if I come to your house, you're going to be pursued by a lot of agencies and energies you don't really want to have anything to do with. So he didn't want to do that. But when I got to Romania, I was very eager to talk to David and find out. I thought I was going to get a briefing on what the hell was going on, because I'd read the book and I decided to publish it. It wasn't published yet then. And I was misdirected in Romania. I was traveling with two people, one of which traveled with me from New York. Another one we met at the airport in Bucharest. And because the planes were late, our room was sold out from under us. So we had no place to stay. And the taxi driver, who was being paid for by my sponsor in Romania, drove all around this town of Sinaia looking for a place to stay, talking to people. We ended up going into the mountains just to find a place to stay for the night. We might have stayed 2 nights there, but we were kind of like strung out, and it was very difficult. And basically, I made it to the Sphinx because this town was not far from the Sphinx. So I was able to figure out how to ride a bus to the town of Bușteni. It must have cost 35 cents. But boy, that was the easy part. The hard part was figuring out in a completely different language how I was going to get, to the right place. Somehow I was able to figure it out with my friend, and who I didn't know prior to that. He was a fractal scientist. And on the bus, or on the bus, we then heard a woman, I heard her say the Sphinx. So I asked her if she spoke English, and she told us how to get to the cable car to get to the Sphinx. And that was one of the most incredible sights. You get in this cable car, you have to wait 2 hours because there's only one car one goes one way and one goes the other way. There's not a bunch of cable cars like they used to have at Disneyland. There's just one. It's big. It holds a lot of people, but it takes 2 hours to wait to get your turn. And you're going straight up these mountains. They're beautiful until you get above the mountain, the tree line. And then you land in this rolling hills that look like The Sound of Music, if you've seen that movie. And the Sphinx is a kind of modest stone structure that from the left profile looks exactly like the head of a man. From the right, I was using the lens of my camera, it looked like a griffin or a lion. So there's now, since that time, a platform built exactly where you can see the exact shot of the Sphinx, what it looks like. And of course, this was quite an adventure. I think I met one person up there who spoke English. He was a Romanian who lived in Canada, and he spoke English. I met another man, I think, too, who was an electrical engineer. He spoke English, but there was not a lot of English speakers up there. And I sat in front of this stone Sphinx, and I wanted to know the connection between David Anderson and Radu Cinnabar. That was my great question. What is that connection? Well, after making it back, although this was a great adventure and a great accomplishment, the next morning was wrought with confusion because we didn't hear from David. We didn't hear from our Romanian sponsor, and we were confused as hell. We went back into the town the next morning to try and find an internet cafe and write them, but we still didn't get any answer. When we returned back to the motel we were staying in, we then found a taxi driver waiting for us to take us to the camp, which was about a 3.5-hour drive, maybe a 3-hour drive to get to the camp. And there, first person I run into, you take a boat, they put us into an apartment, then they take us to, we get on a boat, we go to the island. First person I run into is David, and he makes it very clear. I mean, he finds a young lady to show me around the island, but then he makes it very clear to me he's very busy and he might not have much time to talk to me. And this sort of goes on, and he's really not forthcoming with any information. And he, at the end of by the end of the week, 2 weeks or whatever it is, week, because I think he goes away at one point on assignment, he says, I'm going back into the time travel business. He's been out of it for some time, for 5 years. That's all I can tell you, and you'll be the first to hear about it. And he then made an announcement. He had a new company called Anderson Multinational, and he was reacquiring his interest in the Time Travel Research Center. It was now called the Anderson Institute, and the one in Long Island had already been shut down, and there was now one in Northwest New Mexico. He didn't tell me specifically where. And I assume, but do not know, that it's in the vicinity of Shiprock. That's just my intuition. I've tried to get people to go there and check it out, check out the area, but they don't respond. They don't get it, or they're repelled. So I don't know that it's in Shiprock, because Shiprock has a highway running up to it, and it goes all along the western side of New Mexico, north and south, and it used to be called the 666 Highway. They've changed the name. Christians did not like the 666 Highway, so they've changed the number. But that's what it was called. I assume it's in that vicinity. But in any case, this is some of the backstory. Now, the following year, well, I shouldn't say it wasn't that year. I had gotten very ill, and I attribute it to a psychic attack, and it might have been a psychic attack because when I woke up the next morning in my apartment, I went over to my friend that I'd come with, Tantra Bensko, and I knocked on her door and I said, I'm not going in. I'm sick. Let them know that I'm not well. And before I said that, she says, you're under psychic attack. I said, well, I know. We'd eaten some river fish that was prepared for us. And you don't want to eat river fish because of the immunities. It's sort of like Americans getting Montezuma's revenge when you go to Mexico. You don't drink the water because you don't have the natural immunities. So it's the same thing there. And I got very sick. She didn't get sick, but I did. So maybe I was under psychic attack. But what I do remember is I went to bed feeling sick, and I sweated profusely. I sweated so much that when I woke up, my t-shirt was so soaked, I took it off and hung it on a hanger in the bedroom. It was a very nice bedroom. And 2 days later, it was still wet. I've never seen a t-shirt be so soaked. It usually dry out. But in any case, that's how much I was sweating, doing a lot of shakes, and I was not able to go in. They sent over a driver with a meal and asked me if I wanted to see a doctor. They'd send a doctor over. I said, no, it's not necessary. I don't need to see a doctor. And then around 2:00 in the afternoon, Serene Hermuz showed up. I forgot that he was coming to the island to meet me, my publisher, who had published Red Ooze. And he was very apologetic, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't want it. I'll go. I mean, I'll leave." I said, "No, come on in. I'm fine. I can talk to you." And he had the CD from Radu Cinemar. He had the CD. So he gave it to me. And thank you very much. We talked. I found out we had a lot in common because we were both publishers of esoteric information, and we've always gotten along very well. So he said goodbye. And then Radu, so then I made it back to the island the next day, and I tried to get a bunch of people to listen to the CD with me, especially David, but I couldn't get anybody. I was managed to find a CD player from a guy who had one. He was an American, who's now passed away. He used to donate to the camp. He had a security company, and he was down on the other side of the table talking to some girl about her theatrical repertoire or whatever. They were having a conversation. So I was there by myself. They weren't paying any attention to me or it. And I listened to Radu's statement about the nature of who built it and why, but he couldn't talk about it like it was mysterious. Now, this has been discussed in future books. Now he's talking, it's sort of what he's referring to as an alien presence. But at the end of the tape, he says, "Please, I don't want you to share this with anybody." So it's a good thing I couldn't find anybody, because I would have felt stupid after listening to it, and everybody's around. "Oh, I'm not supposed to share it with anybody," except for Dr. David Anderson. I'd like him to listen to it because I'd very much like to meet him. So he's telling me here that the two haven't met. Whereas I got the impression from David, he knew what I was talking about. So I went up to David and I told him, "I've got this CD I'd like him to listen to. Radu says you're the only one that can listen to it." David said, "I just don't have time," because he was working on projects with kids and whatnot. I don't know if he was avoiding it, but he said, "I don't really have the time." So I said, "Okay, I'll send it to you when you get home." He lived in Rochester then. So when I got home, I sent it to Rochester. And he never listened to it. It wouldn't be until I went back in 2009, saw him again. David lectured extensively on time travel, and those lectures have now been put into, no, not those lectures, but my breaking down of those lectures, which he put on his website. I broke them down into very simple 8th grade math and science, and they're now available at the Time Travel Education Center for free. The first 7 videos of the series are free, and they explain that the science and math of time travel, science and math that time travel does not violate the laws of science and math. Even though it's an 8th grade level, it might take a few run-throughs. It certainly took me a lot of run-throughs to be able to get it and to explain it. David was very impressed with the articles I wrote, because he said nobody's had the patience to break it down so simply. And he wanted to use them in his public lectures, the articles that I had written. So that was all wonderful. But after that, it was about 6 weeks or so after I had seen him in Romania that he came to my house, and he had the opportunity to listen to Radu's tape. He listened to it in its entirety. And, well, I should backtrack. After it was a few days after I had showed him the CD, or asked him to CD, I said to him, I'm really glad. No, I have my time mixed up. It was before that. I said to him that I'm very glad that somebody was interviewing him, or I was interviewing him, or somebody was recording it. And I said to him, I'm glad you're honest about telling me about Radu, that you don't know him. And then he got kind of red and embarrassed, like he was like he wasn't telling me the whole truth. That was very awkward. And then later, when I showed him the CD, he says, people have told me that I've met Radu. That was weird. Now, apparently, when I broke it down further, is he had met people in the government who said that he had met Radu, but Radu doesn't use that name. Radu's statements do not indicate that he's met David. So when he was at my house, he listened to the CD and he said, I'm very impressed that Radu trusts you so much. That's really all about, he said. I could not make any connection between the two. It's mysterious. I thought they would have to be connected. Since then, I have determined that I am the connection between the two. It's me, because I have, although it's enigmatic and tenuous, I have a connection to both of these people. And I had asked my Romanian mother-in-law for her insight on this. And she says, well, David is the one who brought you to Romania. And my life has changed in Romania. There's another important aspect to this Romanian story. And because you've asked and you seem to be fascinated in listening, you're welcome to interrupt me at this point if you want. But I can take this a step further, because I will go back to my first trip to Romania, where I was, as they say, we were lost. We thought the taxi driver was our tour guide. He takes us to this castle called Peles Castle, a popular tourist destination in Sinaia. Sinaia is in the mountains of the Carpathians. It's not too far from the Sphinx. And it's known as the gateway to Transylvania because it's in the mountains. But when Peles Castle, he leads us there, and he's just taken to a tourist spot. We didn't know. He was just dumping us there. We ended up walking all the way back to the hotel, which took a lot of geophysical sensibility by myself to find the way back. But in any case, I'm walking along this cobble road up to the castle, and I'm by myself because my two friends are ahead of me. And this beggar comes out, and he's a very aggressive beggar. He's dressed too well to be a beggar. He's almost like dancing, like a fool, almost. And he's putting out his hand, and I don't know what he wants. It takes me a while to figure out that he's begging, and I don't have any Romanian money for him. And all the money I have, I feel trusted because I'm the treasurer for the trip. I'm the traveling secretary. So he, and then when I get back, my friend Tantra writes to me, sends me an email with a link talking about how the tradition of beggars in Romania, they are Solomonari, they are called. They are the indigenous spirits of Romania. And they are the indigenous spirits which initiated the patron god of Romania, Zalmoxis, who was a man. And they took him into the inner earth for 4 years and initiated him, whereupon he was transformed into a god, and he reemerged to teach the antecedents of what became Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity. You can trace back the wisdom of these religions into his. There's thousands of books written of him in Romanian. But there's only one in English, which is called Zalmoxis, the Hidden God, written by a professor, a famous professor out of the University of Chicago who was Romanian. He has parks and whatnot named after him in Romania, but I asked my mother-in-law, which of these books are authentic? She says, none of them. You have to know the inner spirit. It's not that they don't have value, but if you want to learn the truth, you have to know the spirit. But the Solomonari are indigenous spirits which will appear as beggars, as sheep, or as shepherds. And when they appear as sheep, as beggars, they are testing your heart. And if you give something back, they will give you the heart of Romania. And this is a tradition that everybody knows. It's a fable. Well, I took this to heart because I said, well, I didn't know that. Because I'm from New York, where, beggars are calculating and predatory. It's not the same thing. Not all of them, but many of them are. They used to have schools for begging in New York that would teach you how to beg, to extract money. And many of the wealthy people in Manhattan have guilt complexes, and they're very ready to give away money, whether it be $5 or $10 is nothing. So you could make money sitting on a Wall Street begging. As they say, there were courses in it. So I had a skeptical eye towards beggars. And of course, where do I hear about this? On New York radio. They would advertise, so to speak. But in any case, I would go back to Romania. I would be brought there back by different circumstances, people wanting me to do tours or be part of a tour. That happened 3 years in a row. And when I went back, I went out of my way to find a beggar. Palace Castle again. And I, gave him something, and he blessed me many times over. That night I had some very incredible dreams, and I ended up going to my direction, because I was telling the tour sponsor where to go, to Sarmisegetuza, the valley, which is in the Valley of the Golden Thrones in Transylvania. It's the heart of Transylvania, which is where the people at Atlanticron, the camp, directed me to go. So I had gone there. That's whole involved stories. But eventually I would return there the next year, and I would meet on the grounds of the sacred Sarmisegetuza the woman who would become my wife a few years later, and is my wife now as of 6 years. She's Romanian. And it was a very beautiful young lady and much younger than me, but we were destined to be together. So it's like, you talk about a fable, getting the heart of Romania. Wow. This is the heart. I mean, I was not looking for a wife. I was not, but this did a lot to round out and help my life. And it still does. So I was making this fable come true. And when I go to Romania, which I would keep doing if it wasn't for COVID, it's like I will run into a beggar. It was like what would be their equivalent of a road stop of these 7-Eleven type stores, but they're much nicer in Romania. They've got natural food and stuff in them. Not everything's natural, but a lot. It's just like, it's not like a 7-Eleven here, but on the roadside stops where you get gas and you can go to the bathroom and get food. When I was at one of these stops on my last trip, this old gypsy woman comes out, and she's begging, and I give her something. It's like, boom, good. That's the gesture I give. I had this happen outside of a restaurant in Bucharest, and I was challenged by my daughter, who was with me, and by two of my Romanian friends. And the two Romanians say, well, what are you going to do? You're going to give money to every beggar that comes to you? I said, no, you won't see any more beggars come to me. You won't see any more. And sure enough, there were not. And I explained to them, there's a right brain and a left brain. The left brain is logical, but all of life is not logical. Even an idiot knows that. It's like, so I'm not pandering to strict logic. By engaging in the right side of the brain, the creative, the intuitive, the psychic side, I'm honoring this tradition. I honored this tradition by giving it to this gypsy lady. It was again a gypsy who said, I thought she's trying to sell me flowers. And I go, no, I don't need any flowers. And then she points, no, for me. Oh, I smile at her. Oh, I understand. But I did not get approached by any beggars after that. It's usually one. And if it were two, well, maybe I'd get double the feedback. Now, what happened on that trip is I was given a great gift on that trip. I had 8 other people with me. We had a van. We had 6 Americans and 2 Romanians, besides myself. And we're driving up into the Valley of the Golden Thrones, where we're going to stay. But we were going to Chocolatina Cave. Now, I've got to backtrack a bit here on Chocolatina Cave. Before I had my wife-to-be at the time, we were in. I was visiting with her and some of my American friends and a few Romanian friends, and we were taken by this archaeologist I'd met, who took us to this place called Chocolatina Cave. This is a very important cave. I didn't know it at the time. None of us knew it at the time. Of course, it's known as where some of the earliest relics of mankind have been found, the oldest dated human relics, including artifacts and whatnot, have been found in this cave. But we just, went into the mouth of it. It's got a water coming out of it, so you can't go very deep into it at all, unless you have equipment. So got to see the cave. It was incredible, but we had no significance to it. The following year, in 2015, I had occasion to talk to David Anderson. I was doing a podcast. I was interviewing him on a podcast, and we had a lot of talks. And I said before the podcast, and I said, what can you tell me about Romania? Finally, this is like 2015. I first went there in 2008. It's 7 years later. Information does not come fast. And he says, well, I can tell you about Romania. There's a very special place called Chocolatina Cave that have evidence of a time reactor discharge that occurred because the sediment reveals that there was so much heat that occurred there. Not so much heat could have created this element. He didn't tell me what the element was, or the molecular structure called hydroxystalactite, complicated term, but for it to discharge that much energy to create that element, it would have had to be a time reactor. Now, he said it's the most significant place with regards to time on the planet Earth. And I said, well, David, I've been to that cave. He was shocked. Oh, what are you doing at that cave? I explained to him. And he marveled at that fact. Now, this becomes very interesting as we move forward. But first, I will tell you, so I was going back to Chocolatina Cave for the 3rd time with my friends, my daughter and my friends. And because I'd been there the previous year where I'd found another cave. It was another cave, which is called the dry cave. The original cave I was taken to was a wet cave. So when I returned with some other friends, it was a dry cave. And the dry cave, because I told them about the significance of the cave, one of my Romanian friends with a lot of connections got into the dry cave and took his spiritual school in there. And he went in about 3 kilometers where he said, giant bones of a giant. He showed me pictures of them. I have them on video somewhere. I took video of his video. He did a special presentation for me at Atlanticron because I was so interested. But I still haven't gotten into the dry cave. But we were going to investigate the cave with my friends. Unfortunately, what happened, and this is the value of giving to the beggar as far as I see, paying your dues your Romanian dues to the Solomonari, the indigenous spirits. I had paid my dues. I don't know that my friends even had the opportunity to pay their dues because I don't know that they encountered any beggars. But there was so much dissension among the people. We're taking a sacred journey, but there was a lot of dissension, and it was painful to see. I was fortunate that none of the dissension was directed at myself. Nobody was angry with me. But people got angry with each other. And anyway, and it was not good. But this is what happens on a sacred journey. And one of my friends who was having a lot of negative stuff attracted to him told me if we were in Egypt, he said it would be a lot worse. But because he'd had experiences there. But in any case, we get to the road, that we come to a fork in the road, and somebody says, which way do we go? And I said, well, that road goes to the cave, but let's go up this road. I want to see what's there. So we went up the road. The mountain road got pretty steep, and we all decided to turn around. And we turn around, and we see these kids coming up a gully. What are they doing? They have backpacks. And finally, they come up and tell us, oh, go up to the camp. There was a scouting camp. He says, it's about a quarter mile up the road. Go see the camp director. He knows he knows everything. Go see him. So we turn the van back around and we go up to the camp, and it's like it has a sign in English that says open, Chocolatina. So we meet the man. He speaks English, but he's more confident with an interpreter. And I say, and then he starts talking about the Philadelphia experiment. So then they introduce me and, tell him who I am, which is kind of it was interesting that he mentions the Philadelphia experiment. And I ask him, why does that sign say open in English? He said, I don't know. I just did it. I just put it in English. He says, it's open. You're the first ones to take advantage of it. Everybody loved him. And he came out, he fed us, he gave us wine. Romanian hospitality was very nice. And I said, I'm coming back. Now, when I got back, I got a Facebook message from a friend of mine in Romania who's a movie director, and Andre. And Andre says, I was just up here at the camp at Chocolatina, and this man said that there was an American here 2 weeks ago. He didn't remember the name, but I said, that must be Peter Moon. And he says, yeah, that's right. It's Peter Moon. I said, well, that's so neat. And then Andre sends me pictures of him in caves. He's got a wetsuit on. Oh, and these just magnificent formations. Little did I know that Andre would arrange for me to revisit the camp the following year. And I would be in one of those wetsuits in one of these incredible caves, in Chocolatina Cave. But what happened was, after I got back from that trip, I started thinking about next year. What's going to happen next year? It took me till January, which was, 4 months later, to realize that none of my friends were coming back with me because there had been too much bad blood. Again, it wasn't directed at me, and I realized I'm going back by myself. And I managed to thrive when I'm around Romanians, and I'm the only American. I thrive. I don't speak the language. I have enough familiarity to be able to translate, Google Translate. I do Radu's translations. I can translate the Romanian with the help of Google Translate. And if there's any tough passages, which are few and far between, I ask my Romanian wife, who's now an American citizen, but she helps me with the tough ones. But so when I go back the following year, which was 2 years ago, I now have been to the camp before, and my friend was able to secure a reservation for me to stay because they had a scouting camp going on. So we made sure we had rooms for the four of us who went up. I went up with three other Romanians, two of which were kids, and a friend of mine. And when I get there in the evening, guy comes out and says, "How would you like to go to the cave tomorrow?" I said, "Yeah, I'll go to the cave." So I got to go in the cave. He provided a wetsuit. He provided a hard hat, a light, wet boots, and I was in the cave for 5 hours. And I went, I believe, very close to where I believe this discharge occurred. I was only able to ascertain that later by consulting some scientific papers about where the hydroxystalactite was found. And I believe I was right there. However, had I gone in, I don't know I don't know that I would have had any special experience. I was mostly enduring physical exhaustion and just trying to get through the journey. And it was not an easy journey going through that. We were at least a mile deep into the cave. So David has since told me that Chocolatina Cave is not the only area of space-time where space-time motive force has discharged, but it is the most significant place of time reactor phenomena on the globe, by far, he said. So he has emphasized how important it is. Now, what happens with these Solomonari people, these Solomonari beings, their tradition is they will take you to a cave. They will take you to a cave for initiation. You don't necessarily go in the cave. You might sit by the cave and you might be invited in. This invitation might be physical. It might, more often than not, it's metaphysical. You go into the cave in meditation. You not necessarily have to go inside the cave. Now, I have gone to Chocolatina Cave and meditated. Very simple. But after the fourth time of going to the cave, I was actually invited into the cave, deep into the cave. I did not ask. The people of that valley emulate the Solomonari themselves. They are part Solomonari, whether they realize it or not. And to the degree they do, they often don't talk about it. They will bring, so here again, I was experiencing it. My ultimate goal is to bring David into the cave, introduce him into the cave. I don't think he's been there physically. I don't know what he's seen with his time reactor device, if he's seen anything. I just know he said it's very important. And David is more silent than vociferous on these subjects. But I feel like it's my job to initiate him and to become part Solomonari myself in terms of offering him. And I've only realized this in the last few weeks. So all of this is complementary to the work of Radu Sinamar, who talks about tales of inside the earth, civilizations within the earth, but it's on a different vibrational frequency. All of this going into the earth is symbolic of returning to one's native source of where one comes from. And with that, I will recede into the... I'll shut up. You can ask me. I stay on with you a bit more, and you can ask me any questions.
Yes, well, I wanted to kind of shift over into the Montauk culture, the pharaohs, and how that ties into the, Aboriginal American culture and nations up there in that particular area in the Northeast. And you're uncovering the hidden information, forbidden information, when it comes to the Montauk pharaohs up there in the Northeast. What can you tell us about that? Because that information has been hidden for a while.
Well, it's one of the Montauk's Artie Crippen, Red Medicine, who is actually half Chinese. His mother was from Hong Kong. His father was half Montauk Indian, half Shinnecock Indian. And his connection is he's the one who he actually got to meet David Anderson, but he introduced me to his teacher, Roosevelt Gainey, Qigong grandmaster, who's since passed. But it was the Qigong that enabled me to embrace the Romanian stuff. I wouldn't have done it. Qigong has been a part of all of my Romanian adventures. I don't talk about it too much, but that was the pharaoh connection, because he also, in his own way, brought David Anderson to Montauk, because it was the first time he'd been to Montauk in 30 years. And his return to Montauk coincided with Dr. David Anderson coming to Montauk to show us a video of his time reactor. And Artie got to see it, and the two of them got to meet, which was a great day. But the Montauk pharaohs are the guardians of Camp Hero. The problem with Montauk and Camp Hero is that these areas have been highly compromised and overtaken by dark energies. And therefore, they would have the same attributes and properties of being portals to the inner earth. Indeed, they are. Montauk. But the accessibility is not so easy. There's too much negative vibe. It's been compromised and spoiled. Transylvania is a much more open frequency. So the pharaoh traditionally is the one who is the gateway or interlocutor between heaven and earth. And when we say heaven and earth, sometimes we look outside, we can also look inside. We can think of Shambhala as the heaven inside the earth. So indigenous people see the world differently than so-called, quote unquote, non-indigenous people. Everybody's actually indigenous, but, we know what we're talking about when we say non-indigenous and indigenous. The non-indigenous are those who have divorced themselves from their indigenousness quality. And so basically, the role of the pharaoh is as a gateway or as a guardian. And of course, it becomes politicized. It becomes something that people want for the power it holds instead of being the natural function. And all of this is all about getting the natural function. Montauk and time travel is so loaded with mind control, MK Ultra, confusion, decimating of the indigenous people and their rights, their traditions. That's what Montauk is. And when we go to Transylvania, we have unspoiled, protected country. And that's two big differences there. Now, it's not that Montauk cannot provide that, but we still don't even have the indigenous people of Montauk being recognized or respected. Governor Cuomo, who since made a lot of headlines for reasons that he'd rather not make headlines, made minor headlines 5 or 6 years ago when he was presented with a bill that was approved by the New York State Assembly and the New York State Senate, recognizing the Montauk Indians as a tribe because they had been declared extinct in 1910 or 1909. And all he had to do was sign the bill, but he wouldn't sign it. He vetoed it. And he says, this needs to be studied by the Secretary of State. That's the last we've ever heard of it. That's who Governor Cuomo is. And he's infamous for other things right now, but he should be most infamous for that.
Wow.
And so this is, when you don't see, this is just a statement that the culture that we live in does not recognize the sacred. They desecrate the sacred. And this is what can be said about the pharaohs. We've also lost the pharaohs of Egypt. We don't have that function. It's not that somebody couldn't carry out that function, but it's not recognized or respected. In fact, the Christians went in and desecrated so much of Egypt. What was sacred to Egypt, they desecrated as evil, not even identifying the role of Christ in the Great Pyramid. So this is just, the times of ignorance, the times of insanity. And this is, the Pharaoh has the role of connecting the heaven and the earth. But what a crummy job. We can even identify, there's a book called Jesus, Last of the Pharaohs, and where Jesus is identified as the Pharaoh, which would make him the interlocutor between heaven and earth. Now, Christianity tells us that Christ is the interlocutor between heaven and earth. We can even make some associations with the capstone of the Great Pyramid, which he is referred to as the rejected stone, which is the capping of the Great Pyramid. These are esoteric references. So without trying to wave a flag for Christianity, the Christian New Testament is a testament to the fact that humanity rejects the capstone, rejects the crowning glory of the pyramid of life, the energy of life. We don't have to look through it with a Christian lens, but if we choose to look through it with a Christian lens, it is a metaphor for the state of humanity and the lack of knowledge of how to interface between the heaven and the earth. It's not much different than being able to be dead and come back alive and go into the realm and go into the dead. This is essentially what a shaman does. Shaman goes into those worlds that are not ordinarily understood or recognized by ordinary people. This gives the shaman special abilities. And of course, some shamans are more effective or appropriate than others. So when you think of the idea of a idealized version of a pharaoh or the idealized version of the Christ, you have somebody who delivers the goods, which is another name for Messiah, which means deliverer. Deliverer also alludes to a birthing, like a rebirthing, but it's a deliverer. The thing is, who delivers the goods? And ultimately, inside of yourself, the great lesson here is from, and I don't like to quote from the Bible because I don't think in a context of a minister or an evangelist, because so much of what they do is objectionable. But I would also say there's quotations that appear in the Bible, not necessarily originating there, that would say, the kingdom of heaven is within you. These things, you can do greater things than I, Christ speaking. So all of this wonderful ability to interface between heaven and earth, this is something that you are capable of doing yourself. Know thyself, to thine own self be true. If you go in and find the true self, you've got the whole game figured out and fixed, and you can go about that if you are so astute and wise to be able to recognize who your true self is versus the false selves that can present themselves on the path. So I hope I've addressed your question to your satisfaction. If not, you can ask me more.
Yes, you did. Another issue is you talked about the pyramid, the Sphinx, there in Romania, and then of course we have similarities of similar structures, architectural structures in America. In your experience, have you discovered a link between those geographical locations where in their time they had technology that kind of synced them all together?
Well, first I want to clarify that the pyramid, there's no pyramid in Romania per se. The pyramid, people often confuse the Bosnian pyramid, or what is said to be the Bosnian pyramid, with being in Romania, but it's in Bosnia. They're not that far apart physically, but they're two different countries. There are supposedly pyramids underneath Transylvania, Sarmisegetusa. I've been told that radar has revealed that. I've not seen them or had it verified. But all of these, the earth is very connected, much like the human body is connected. The life of the earth is like an organism, and it can be viewed that way. And there are studies done on it. So much like all the meridians in the traditional Chinese medicine of the human body are connected to each other, yes, so would various spots on the earth. And you can geometrically correlate or even confabulate them because there is, if you can see the associations on a globe, and some people do studies. Peter Shampoo is actually, he pronounces it shampoo, but it would be spelled shampoo, Champeaux. He is a geomancer, and he does a lot of work with correlating grid lines and sacred work. He's sort of expert at correlating these different areas. And I know, when I was with him, he put some of these spots and correlate them. But yeah, energy runs and energy flows. And the pyramid energy is a basic building block of life going down to the molecular level. And it's why they call what is that word? So many pet food is called tetra. And the tetra is after the tetrahedron, because the tetrahedron is a pyramid. It's a four-pointed pyramid, and that's the basic molecular constituent of life is pyramidal. So and when you put yourself in a pyramid, it will concentrate energy. It will focus energy. And in martial arts, you have what is called the kwa. That is an upside down pyramid that runs around your groin. Like if you take the navel, touch your thumbs at the navel and spread the hand outward, and then put your index fingers together, you'll have a pyramid, upside down pyramid. That's representative of the kwa. And that is the focal point of energy in martial arts. It's also where the energy generates from. You will visualize a flame in there. Flame is fire in the middle. Pyramid means pyre, like pyr means fire. Pyramid, fire in the middle. Fire in the middle of the pyramid. That's where the energy comes up from the lower chakra area, the groin, and goes up the spine. And that it's a source of energy. It comes from a pyramid. It's a concentration of energy. There have been whole studies of why pyramids amplify or accelerate energy. So all of these spots would be energetic points.
Great, awesome. And on the Montauk there, that's tragic because most of us had never heard what the governor did to them there 5 years ago by rejecting to recognize them there. Have you met any of the Montauk? What are they ethnic? Their ethnicity there, or talked to any of them?
You're talking about the Montauk tribes.
Yes.
Tribe. Well, of course, I've known many Montauks, and I think the best example to give, there's two examples to give. Is first I'll talk about Sharon Jackson, also known as Queen Winona Redbird. She was one of my first Montauk friends, and shaman. She was very embracive of me, and she is dark skinned, but not too dark. I think if I were to identify her, you could easily quickly say she's black if you just quickly say that. But then if you look a little further, you might say mulatto, but that doesn't really fit it either. Let's just say she's dark skinned, darkish, more like coffee milk, light coffee milk, latte. But I considered her dark skinned. One day, I had the occasion to meet her mother, who was passed now. Blonde hair, older lady, blonde hair, white skin. She could pass for a Caucasian easily, but not quite, maybe. Not because of the skin color, and I mentioned it to the mother, and she just, in fact, Sharon has a son who's an albino, but her mother just laughed and said, we're everything. Montauks are everything. Like, there is no Siberian Indian stereotype that Indians are supposed to fit into with the Montauks. Not at all. There are blue-eyed, blonde-haired Montauks that are associated with the Welsh. I've met Montauk tribe from Utah that could fit into a typical Caucasian stereotype. But they identify as Indians. They are Indians. They're recognized as Indians. I went to their naming ceremony in Connecticut. Now, I think the best description is from the medicine man. Okay, he's half Chinese and he's half Native American. His driver's license will say on it Native American. He's got a brother. His driver's license will say Caucasian. Another sibling that'll say black. Another sibling that'll say Asian. It's like there is no, this is really a true rainbow family, a rainbow heritage of people. If you were the Shinnecox, who are the cousins of the Montauks, don't always get along with them, although there is a lot of interconnection between the two. They're very dark-skinned, but not exclusively. And as I say, and then there's the Montauks at the trial in 1910. They have pictures of them. They'll say, "Well, there are no Indians here. They're all too black to be Indians." And to tell you the truth, they're not all black. They just said no. And how could black people be Indians? Well, there were plenty of black Indians. There were plenty of black indigenous Moors. But this is all a attempt to annihilate it's really about white supremacy is all it is, because the indigenous peoples have been allied. Bruce Lee used to go to the Shinnecock powwows. And that's how the medicine man knew him, because there was an alliance between the indigenous people and the Chinese. You had, the problem is, white supremacy and a denigration of indigenous people, which is still very much intact today, no matter how much political lip service is given to Black Lives Matter and other causes which espouse indigenous justice. It's a lot of lip service by the politicians who exploit it for their own gain.
Indeed, definitely. Yeah. Well, I know you said you can go an hour. We appreciate you going a little bit over that. Yeah, really appreciate your time. And maybe we can do this again in the future.
Well, it was a pleasure to be with you, and you let me talk, and I always think that works best when I just talk. It's the most natural, and I'm happy to answer your questions too. So it was a pleasure to be with you. My website is skybooksusa.com. There's also the timetraveleducationcenter.com, and I have a new book that I've co-authored and I'm publishing. That it's now book in ebook form. It's now on Kindle. It will be out in hardback in June. It's called The Roswell Deception and the Demystification of World War II.
Okay. Roswell Deception, Demystification of World War II. And that'll be out in June, hardback, right?
Yeah. Perfect bound, it's called. Paperback, but it'll be hard copy.
Okay. Paperback. All right, awesome. Great.
And I will be putting up an advanced publication sales on the internet in the next few weeks, so people can get a discount on the book if they want to order it direct. Be one of the first ones to get that. So I will be putting that up very soon, probably in a week or so. But anyway, great to be with you, and I'll see you again.
Okay, take care. Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Yeah, hit the leave studio button there. Well, there it is, family. Awesome. It's a little, different than how we usually do things and talk things. But I think it's important to, expand out and have get a range of information from a range of different presenters who had experienced, many, interesting life experiences. I think to bring and introduce to the family, I think is important. I know that we tend to want to focus on our same, stay in our zone, but sometimes we have to expand out a bit to make us more well-rounded, and our depth of knowledge and information, varied, right? So I think that's important. So hopefully the family enjoyed this here. Let me see if Hanu's around here. Hopefully he didn't fall asleep there. Yes, unfortunate. Okay. All right, looks like A1 fell asleep there, family. So I will wake him up later, but we can end this here now. And we went an hour and close to 40 minutes. Nice and short and sweet today. Lou Era Grassroots. The last 5 minutes he presented hurt. Hashtag been here. Okay, interesting. All right. All right, so We will end it there, family. And thanks for tuning in, taking your time out. And again, his website is skybooks.usa.com. And you can purchase his work directly from there. All right, we'll end that. And everyone there can have a good night and stay safe out there. And we will see you again soon. Take care.